I heard everything. Every single word. Not just the ones he said out loud, in front of the entire pack, in front of the elders, in front of hundreds of eyes watching me stand there in my plain dress with my heart cracked open like an egg on a hot sidewalk. No. I heard the ones he didn't say. The thoughts he kept locked behind that perfectly carved jaw and those cold, silver eyes. The words he assumed were his alone. Private. Hidden. Safe. She's a nobody. A weak little omega from the border pack. I'd sooner die than claim her. That was Derek Ashwood. Alpha of the Ironmore pack. The most powerful wolf in 3 territories. The man the moon goddess had chosen as my mate. And I, Emily Voss, had heard his thoughts since I was 12 years old. Not everyone's. Just his. Because the moon goddess has a sense of humor. Or maybe, she has a plan. This is the story of the day Derek rejected me in front of everyone he loved. And the months that followed, when karma decided she was done being patient. Part 1, The Girl No One Noticed. Let me take you back before the ceremony. Before the humiliation. Before everything changed. I grew up in Greywood, a small border settlement attached to the greater Ironmore Pack territory. We were the people no one wrote songs about. We kept the eastern boundary, we paid our tributes, we stayed quiet. We didn't produce warriors or alphas or legends. We produced farmers. Healers. Trackers. My mother was a healer. The kind of woman whose hands smelled like lavender and pine resin, who could knit a broken bone with a compress and a song. She died when I was 9. A rogue attack on the border that the main pack was 3 hours late responding to. 3 hours. My father never really recovered from that. He threw himself into border patrol, almost desperately, like if he worked hard enough the pack would see us. Acknowledge us. Protect us the way they protected the wolves who lived closer to the alpha's compound. It never happened. But I didn't grow up bitter. I know that might sound impossible, but I didn't. My mother had this saying, the moon doesn't shine brighter for those who demand it. She shines for those who are still enough to receive her. I held on to that. I was quiet. I read everything I could get my hands on. I studied my mother's healing notes until I could recite herb combinations in my sleep. I trained, not in combat, because that wasn't really encouraged for Omega females in Greywood, but I ran. Every morning, before the sun cleared the ridge, I ran through the forest and I listened. That's when the thoughts were clearest. His thoughts. Derek Ashwood was 4 years older than me. I had never spoken to him directly. Never been within 20 feet of him before my 16th birthday. But I had been hearing fragments of his mind since I was 12, like a radio station that only came in clearly under certain conditions. At first I thought I was going crazy. Then I thought it was a curse. Then I realized, slowly and with a kind of horrified wonder, that the moon goddess had given me something no one else had. A window. Into the soul of the man she intended for me. And what I saw through that window was complicated. Derek Ashwood was not a simple villain. I want to be honest about that. His thoughts weren't always cruel. When he was alone, truly alone, riding the ridge at night, or sitting by the river after training, he was something else entirely. He wondered if he was good enough. He grieved his father, who'd died passing the alpha title to him at just 21. He lay awake worrying about his pack, about the rogue threat that kept creeping closer, about whether he was making the right decisions. He was lonely in a way that only the powerful can be lonely, surrounded by people who need something from you, and not one person who simply wants you. I knew him better than anyone alive. And he didn't even know my name. Part 2, The Mate Ceremony. The mate reveal ceremony happens every 5 years in Ironmore. Young wolves who have come of age gather at the Standing Stones, an ancient circle deep in the pack's old-growth forest, and the moon goddess's blessing settles over the gathering like mist over still water. Mates recognize each other. Sometimes it's immediate, a pull in the chest, a scent that hits like lightning. Sometimes it takes a moment, eyes meeting across the circle. I turned 20 the spring of the ceremony. I almost didn't go. Not because I was afraid. Because I already knew. I had been hearing Derek's thoughts for 8 years by then. I had heard him speak his future mate's name in a prayer once, just once, 2 years before, asking the moon to make her strong. To make her worthy. I had cried for an hour after that. Not because it hurt. Because it was the most honest thing I had ever heard a person say. But there was another voice in my head about the ceremony, my own. And it whispered, "He won't want you. You know what he thinks of Greywood wolves. You've heard it." I had. I'd heard him agree with his beta, Callum, that border pack omegas were a drain on resources. I'd heard him dismiss a proposal to integrate Greywood more fully into Ironmoor's training program. I'd heard, once, a conversation where he described the kind of mate he hoped for, strong, high-ranking, from a warrior bloodline. That wasn't me. But I went. Because you don't hide from the moon goddess. My mother taught me that too. I wore a pale green dress, nothing special, nothing meant to impress. My hair was down. I had small hands, a narrow frame, and eyes that people described as unsettling because of how still they were. I wasn't what you'd call striking. I was the kind of girl people looked past. Right up until the moment the moon's blessing moved through the circle like a wave. And every cell in my body turned toward Derek Ashwood like a compass needle finding north. I felt it with my whole being. The mate bond, warm and vast and undeniable, like standing in a river of light. My breath left me. My knees went soft. I pressed my hand to my chest like I could hold the feeling in. Across the circle, Derek went very still. He felt it too. I know because I heard it, a roar of recognition in his mind, involuntary and primal. Mate. There. Her. Then, almost immediately, something else. No. No. This can't be right. I watched his silver eyes find me through the crowd. Watched the recognition flicker, and then watched him decide. I heard that decision happen in real time. She's from Greywood. An Omega. Nobody. I can't, the pack won't respect a mate like this. There must be a mistake. There was no mistake. But Derek Ashwood had spent 24 years building walls, and he wasn't about to let a moon-blessed bond knock them down in the middle of a public ceremony. He walked toward me. The crowd parted. People were watching, of course they were watching, they always watched the alpha, and I stood there with my heart in my throat and my hands clasped in front of me, trying to look calm. Trying not to show that I could hear every panicked, dismissive thought racing through his head. He stopped 3 feet from me. Up close, he was even more overwhelming than I had expected. Tall, well over 6 feet, broad shoulders, dark hair, those silver eyes that his pack called the alpha gaze. A jaw that could cut glass. He was exactly what you'd expect a high alpha to look like. He looked at me like I was a problem he needed to solve. You felt it, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. His jaw tightened. I heard the thought, she's too calm. Does she know? Can she feel how wrong this is? I kept my face neutral. Then Callum, his beta, appeared at his shoulder and murmured something I couldn't quite catch, but I caught Derek's response to it, clear as a bell in his mind. I know. I know. I'm going to handle it. Handle it. That was the word he used. In his own head. For me. What happened next will live in my memory for the rest of my life. Derek Ashwood squared his shoulders, turned to face the crowd, and in front of every wolf gathered at the standing stones, in front of his pack, the elders, the visiting wolves from 3 neighboring territories, he spoke. I am Alpha Derek Ashwood of Ironmoor. His voice was clear and steady and carried like a bell through the stone circle. The moon goddess has laid a bond between myself and, he paused, barely a breath, and I heard it, I don't even know her name. This female. This female. Not my name. Not even an attempt. However. And that word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. An alpha's duty is to his pack above all else. A mate bond, however sacred, must also serve the strength and unity of the pack. And another pause. His thoughts in that moment were a storm. I cannot accept this bond. The silence that followed was absolute. I formally renounce the mate bond laid by the ceremony. His voice didn't waver. The female is released from any claim or obligation. The moon goddess's blessing is acknowledged and respectfully, I heard the word he chose internally, discarded. Declined. He turned back to me then. Not with cruelty on his face. That almost made it worse, he looked professional. Detached. Like he was finishing a business transaction. I'm sorry, he said, quietly enough that only I could hear. It isn't personal. And in his mind, clear as sunlight through glass, she'll move on. She's a nobody. She'll be fine. I stood there for 3 seconds. Maybe 5. The entire standing stone circle was watching me, waiting to see if I would cry, argue, beg. I did none of those things. I looked at Derek Ashwood, really looked at him, the way I had been listening to him for 8 years, and I said, very quietly, I know. He blinked. Just slightly. I heard the confusion, what does that mean? I turned and walked away. I held it together until I reached the tree line. Then I sat down in the dark between 2 old oaks, and I let myself fall apart, quietly, alone, the way I had learned to do everything. I let myself grieve what might have been. The warmth of the bond that was already cooling at the edges, retreating like a tide. The future I had half imagined and never fully let myself hope for. I cried until there were no more tears. Then I stood up, brushed the leaves from my dress, and I made myself a promise. I will be okay. I will be more than okay. And I will never, ever let a man's inability to see me define my worth. Part 3, The Silence After. The weeks after the ceremony were strange. Greywood was kind to me, in the way small communities are kind. People brought food, avoided the subject entirely, or offered looks of such pained sympathy that I had to excuse myself from rooms just to breathe. My father held me for a long time and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. The pack gossip was less kind, but I stayed off the main territories and let it run its course. What surprised me, what I hadn't expected, was that Derek's thoughts didn't stop. The mind link between mates doesn't just vanish because one party rejects it. The bond phrase thins, becomes unreliable. But it doesn't disappear. Not immediately. Not completely. So I still caught flashes. In the first week, she didn't make a scene. That was unexpected. In the second week, during a pack meeting I wasn't present for, the Greywood girl. Emily. That's her name. And then, almost immediately, as if he were scolding himself, it doesn't matter. I filed that away. He'd learned my name. I threw myself into work. My mother's healing knowledge had always been something I'd studied privately, but now I decided to make it public. I opened a small practice in Greywood, nothing official, just a room in my father's house where I saw people. Word spread faster than I expected. I had a gift for it, it turned out. Not just the herbs and compresses, but the listening. People would come in with a sprained wrist and leave having talked for an hour about their fear of dying, or their loneliness, or the dream they'd given up. I listened to all of it. I also started running further. Past Greywood's boundaries, into the neutral forest. Not into Ironmoor territory, I wasn't foolish, but along the edges of it, where the trees were oldest and the air smelled like cold water and iron and pine. One morning, about 6 weeks after the ceremony, I heard something that stopped me mid-stride. Derek's thoughts, clearer than they'd been in weeks. He must have been nearby, writing the territory lines. The rejection is final. She's moved on. The pack is stable. This was the right decision. He was trying to convince himself. I could hear the effort in it, the way a person repeats a thing when they're not sure they believe it. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I kept running. Part 4, What Karma Sounds Like. 3 months after the ceremony, the rogue situation escalated. I heard it first in Derek's mind, a spike of cold fear that woke me at 2 in the morning, his thoughts fragmenting in a way that told me something was very wrong. Eastern boundary breach. 3 wolves down. The Greywood corridor. My stomach dropped. The Greywood corridor. Where my father patrolled. I was out the door before I was fully dressed. The details came together as I ran, a coordinated rogue attack, larger than anything Ironmore had seen in years. Not random rogues, organized ones, with a leader, with strategy. They had targeted the eastern border specifically because it was undermanned. Because the Alpha had never prioritized integrating Greywood's patrol unit into the main defense network. Because he had decided Greywood wolves weren't worth the investment. There were wounded. 14, by the time I reached the staging area at the edge of the forest. Ironmore warriors, yes, but also Greywood wolves, including 2 of my father's patrol partners. My father was not among the wounded. He had already been taken into the medical tent. I won't describe what I felt when I pushed through that canvas flap. Some moments belong to you alone, and that one belongs to me. I will say only that my father was alive, barely, and that I spent the next 11 hours doing everything my mother had ever taught me. The Ironmore healer, a capable woman named Soren, looked at me about an hour in and said, with no preamble, "You trained under Marit Voss." She was my mother. Soren's eyes went wide. Moon's Grace. We've been trying to replace her protocols for 10 years. She stepped back and let me lead. I saved my father. I also saved 4 other wolves that night, 2 of them Ironmore warriors who wouldn't have made it through the standard treatment protocols. One of them was a young man named Bran who, I would later learn, was Derek's youngest cousin. I didn't know that at the time. I just did what needed to be done. Derek arrived at dawn. I heard him before I saw him, his mind a controlled storm, the guilt and anger tightly leashed. He moved through the wounded with that alpha efficiency, checking on his people, speaking to Soren, taking reports. And then he saw me. He stopped. I was kneeling beside my father, checking his bandages, and when I looked up and found Derek standing in the entrance of the medical tent, I saw something I had never seen on his face before. He looked undone. Not by me, specifically. By all of it, the attack, the casualties, the evidence of his own failure to fortify this border. In his mind, raw and unguarded, this is my fault. I knew the eastern line was vulnerable. I chose not to prioritize it. These people. He stopped that thought before it could finish. Locked it away. Put the alpha mask back on. But I had heard it. He crossed the tent and crouched down beside me. Formal. Careful. Your father? Stable, I said. He'll need 2 weeks of rest and specific herb treatment, but he'll recover fully. And the others you treated? All stable. Bren will need monitoring for the fever, I've left instructions with Soren. A silence. And then, barely above a whisper, "Thank you." In his mind, why didn't I know she could do this? Why didn't I? The thought cut off. And then, quieter, almost like something tearing, I didn't even know her name until 2 weeks after the ceremony. I stood up and smoothed my hands on my skirt. I looked at him steadily, the way I had learned to look at people, still and without demand. You should increase the rotation on the eastern line, I said. And you should formally integrate Greywood's patrol unit. We know this terrain better than anyone. We've been protecting it for 30 years without adequate support. His jaw tightened. Not with anger, with something harder to name. Shame, maybe. I'll take it under advisement, he said. It wasn't a request, I said, and walked out of the tent. In his mind, as I left, who is she? Part 5, The Thaw. Things shifted after that night. Not dramatically. Not in the storybook way, where everything breaks open all at once and two people fall into each other and the music swells. Life is rarely that clean. But things shifted. Derek did increase the eastern rotation. Within a week, Greywood had 3 times the patrol support it had before. Within a month, a formal integration proposal was on the pack table. I heard his thoughts about these decisions. Not guilt trips to himself, though there were some of those, but genuine reckoning. The long, uncomfortable process of a proud man examining where his pride had made him wrong. He started coming to the eastern border more frequently. Officially, it was oversight of the new patrol structure. But I knew, because I could hear him, that he came partly to see if I was there. The 3rd time our paths crossed on the morning run, he fell into step beside me without asking permission. We ran in silence for a long time. Then he said, "You run every morning." "Since I was 14. I used to run this ridge alone." A pause. I'd assumed it was private. "The forest doesn't belong to one person," I said. Another silence. And then, "You're not what I expected." I glanced at him sideways. "What did you expect?" He took a moment. In his mind, I heard the honest answer before his mouth decided whether to say it: someone broken. Someone angry. Someone who would make this easier by hating me. What he actually said was, someone less settled. "I've had time to settle," I said. We ran without talking after that. But when we reached the point where our paths diverged, he stopped, and so did I, and he looked at me with those silver eyes and said, "I want to apologize. Properly. Not the way I did that night." I waited. "I rejected you based on assumptions I hadn't examined. About your worth. About what my pack needed. About," he stopped. Started again. "I was a coward dressed up as a pragmatist. That's the truth of it." In his mind, "Please don't be gracious. I don't deserve gracious." I thought about that for a moment. "I appreciate the honesty," I said. "But an apology doesn't rebuild a bridge. It just clears the rubble." He blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means thank you for saying it. But there's still a lot of ground between an apology and anything else." He nodded slowly. "I know." And then he said something that cracked the shell of something I had been protecting for months. "Can I keep running with you? Not as an alpha. Not as anything particular. Just running." In his mind, "Say yes. Please. I have no idea what I'm asking for, but please say yes." The mate bond, still thin, still frayed at the edges, pulsed once. "Warm. Tomorrow morning," I said. 5 o'clock. "Don't be late." He wasn't. Part 6, What Was Always True. I am not going to tell you that everything healed easily. It didn't. The mate bond doesn't just spring back to life because two people decide to be in the same space. It has to be tended, like a fire that's burned down to coals. Carefully. Patiently. With full knowledge of what you're asking it to do. Derek and I ran together every morning for 2 months before we had a real conversation that wasn't about pack logistics or border security or my father's recovery. The first real conversation happened on a Tuesday in late autumn, when the frost came early and the light turned gold through the bare oaks, and he asked me, quietly, almost reluctantly, how I had stayed so calm. After the ceremony. After everything. I almost told him the truth right then. Instead I said, "I've spent a long time learning that my worth isn't a vote that other people cast." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Someone taught you that?" "My mother. And 8 years of being unseen." He stopped walking. Turned to look at me. "I'm sorry I was part of that." "You were the largest part," I said honestly. "But you're not the only reason I learned it. And I don't regret learning it." His mind, in that moment, was so quiet I could barely hear it. Like a room after a storm. And then, very simply, I want to be better than the man who did that. I took a breath. Then be better, I said. He looked at me sharply. Did I say that out loud? No, I said. But your face did. He laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and I felt the mate bond flare to life in my chest like a struck match. I should tell you now. I should have told you pages ago, really, the full truth about the mind link. About what I can hear and have always been able to hear. About the 8 years of his private thoughts that I carry like a library inside me. I told him on a Sunday morning in December, sitting by the river where he used to come alone to grieve his father. I told him everything. The first time I heard his thoughts. The moment at the ceremony when I heard him decide. Every thought I had kept to myself. I watched his face cycle through disbelief, then shock, then something approaching awe, then the inevitable dawning horror as he calculated everything I must have heard over 8 years. Everything, he said. Not everything. Fragments. Clearest when you're emotional. The night my father died. I heard you tell him you loved him, I said gently. I heard you promise to make him proud. He was very still. I heard you pray for a mate who was worthy, I continued. I heard you doubt yourself 1,000 times. I heard every crack in the armor. And you still, he stopped. And I still showed up, I said. Because what I heard wasn't a villain. It was a person. Flawed, proud, lonely, trying. I paused. The rejection hurt. It hurt enormously. But I knew it came from fear. Not cruelty. That doesn't make it right. No, I agreed. It doesn't. But it makes it something that can be healed. He reached across the space between us and took my hand. The mate bond didn't roar back to life in a blaze. It was quieter than that. Like a door opening. Like warmth spreading through cold hands. Like coming home after a long, long journey. I need you to know something, he said, his voice low and rough around the edges. I don't deserve this. Any of this. Your patience or your. Derek. He stopped. The moon goddess didn't choose me for you because I was convenient, I said. She chose me because I could see you. All of you. The parts you show and the parts you hide. And she chose you for me because, I think, I needed someone whose healing I could be part of. I looked at him steadily. This was never about deserving. It was always about growing. In his mind, I heard 3 words. Simple. Clear. The truest thing he'd thought in 8 years. Don't let go. I didn't. Epilogue. Greywood was formally integrated into Ironmore 6 months later. My father danced at the ceremony, slowly, with a cane, but he danced. Soren and I co-developed a new healing protocol that was adopted across 3 pact territories. The eastern border hasn't been breached since. And Derek Ashwood, arrogant, complicated, lonely, proud Derek Ashwood, learned to run in the mornings with someone beside him. He never asked me to be someone other than who I was. And I never stopped hearing his thoughts. Though now, most mornings, they sound like this. She's going to be insufferably right about the new patrol rotation. I should tell her the river froze early. I hope she's warm. I hope she knows. He tells me, now. Out loud. In actual words. It turns out the most powerful mind link in the world is nothing compared to a person who chooses to let you in. My mother was right. The moon doesn't shine brighter for those who demand it. She shines for those who are still enough to receive her. I received her. And it is everything.